Tributes, and welcome back to another edition of Hunger Games Chronicles. I'm so glad you guys could make it today. It really means a big deal. I'm recording on my phone today, so the software isn't that great on my phone, but I hope the video will be as great as ever. Thank you, and let's dive into the 141st to 143rd Hunger Games. The 141st Games took place in the year 163. Although this was her first year as president of Pan Am, President Cardew did not fail to disappoint viewers and Panamanians alike during the 141st Games, although this was partly thanks to the creativity of the head game maker responsible for the amazing spectacles of the last 5 years, Camelia Sabrine. This year's victor was an 18-year-old from District 14 named Leo Torres. Leo was a prominent figure in his district, and he was known for being calm and stoic, despite the fact that he had to fend for himself, as he had been an orphan since the age of 7 and had no other relatives to take care of him, as his grandparents were dead as well. He was calm and stoic during the reaping, dressed in a science suit representing District 14. He glanced down at his feet, occasionally looking up to see last year's victor, Reina Valdez, who was also from District 14, glancing nervously at the crowd, as she was not pleased with the thought of picking somebody she knew to represent District 14 during the games. Leo did not pay much attention as a girl named Monica from Sector G was reaped, and she started crying as she walked to the stage. When Leo, who was from Sector A, had his name called, he hardly reacted and glanced up. But as he began walking to the stage, several of his friends and many of the crowd said, "Por favor, no Leo," which translates to "please, not Leo." Once he was at the top of the tower, Leo grabbed a guitar he kept and started playing a merry song, which he did at restaurants in order to earn money. Leo simply practiced his music during the visiting period and did not seem to care about the fact that almost all of his friends in Sector A were squeezed into the room to talk to him. Leo told them not to worry, saying that if they did not worry about him, he would write them a song on the guitar if they wanted. As they tried to say something more, Leo raised a hand to stop them and said, "Si Leo Torres no puede sobrevivir a estos juegos, nadie podrá." With that, he was swiftly escorted out of the room by peacekeepers, but he snapped at one of them for pulling his guitar too hard. Once Leo and Monica were on the plane, they introduced themselves to each other. Monica soon began crying over her misfortune at being raped, while Leo leaned on a wall and played his guitar, humming along with the tune. This annoyed Monica slightly, and she asked Leo if he could play somewhere else, but Leo told her that just because she was sad, that did not mean he had to share her emotions. This made Monica angry, and she asked Leo how he could be playing music at this time, but Leo shot back that this was his hobby. Monica walked towards him and snatched the guitar from his hands, telling him that he could worry about hobbies when they were important. Leo laughed at Monica, but she raised the guitar and Leo saw that she was about to smash it. He hands leapt towards her and punched her so hard in the jaw that she went flying into a wall. Monica massaged her jaw as Leo told her not to mess with him, but just then Reina ran into the carriage of the plane and asked Leo what had happened. Leo explained what Monica had done and told Reina that Monica could not destroy his guitar. Reina nodded and asked Leo why he was so famous in the district, and Leo replied that he was an extremely talented musician. Leo was already of a decent build and extremely charismatic, but he was told off by Master of Training Maxwell Christie after he smuggled his guitar into the training center on the first day of training and played a Spanish song, which caused many tributes, except for the Careers, to encourage him, with several tributes complimenting his music, while the Careers scoffed in the background. On the second day of training, Leo got into a fight with Sargon from 2 after Sargon tried to smash his guitar. Although Sargon and Leo were both muscular, Training Master Christie was forced to taser Sargon, as he had started the fight with Leo. This enraged Sargon, while Destiny from 2 told Leo that she would kill him before the gong even sounded. But Leo told her that she would have to catch him first, before strumming several strings in Destiny's ear, much to the annoyance of Reina and Training Master Christie, who told Leo that he had not accomplished anything during the 2 days of training. However, during his individual training session with the game makers, Leo earned a score of 10, which was higher than most tributes, although Sargon and Destiny both earned scores of 11, and Leo marched down to their apartment and told him to stop jumping up and down. Although Julianus Castro asked Leo what his business was, Leo then returned to the District 14 apartment and played his guitar on the balcony, causing Sacro Myers to tell him to stop playing, as it was midnight already. The interviews took place the next night, and Leo stood backstage wearing a rather dark science suit. He watched as more and more interviews passed and was the last to be interviewed by Ariel McKinnon, who was from District 4. His interview was pretty average until he grabbed his guitar and began singing, with his smooth voice making the audience gasp in admiration, making Leo a firm favorite, while Sargon rolled his eyes from backstage. The next day, the tributes were taken to the launch room underneath the arena, where Leo was given a black shirt and a cyan coat to wear. He prepared himself for the arena, telling Reina it was likely to be a forest arena. Reina then warned him that he should make allies, as the couriers did not like him, but Leo brushed aside her concerns and stepped into his tube, before being lifted into the arena. This year's games took place in an eerie forest and featured bloodthirsty vampires, terrible tarantulas, a crumbling ground, and lasted for 7 days. As the tributes rose into the arena, the first thing Leo noticed was that he was closer to the tributes next to him than he preferred to be, as well as closer than in normal years. He glanced around to see several stumpy trees, but he quickly shivered, due to the colder temperatures of this year's arena. Leo was already annoyed, but became even more annoyed when he saw a figure with blood pouring from their mouths, vampires, leaping from behind tree to tree. The sight of the vampire clearly unnerved Leo, and when the gong sounded, he remained on his podium for several seconds before remembering where he was, but Sargon quickly tackled him to the ground with a dagger at the ready. Sargon attempted to force the dagger through Leo's throat, but just then Lee from 8 fell on top of Sargon, with a sword in his back that had just been thrown by destiny. Sargon shouted in annoyance as Leo quickly grabbed his dagger and ran away, while Sargon pushed Leo away and ran back into the cornucopia to grab another dagger. Leo ran without looking back, but he spent several minutes vomiting on the ground after he stepped on a tarantula. However, he slowly got over the shock and spent the rest of the first day traveling as far away from the cornucopia as he could, holding his dagger at the ready, prepared to use it if he needed to. Night soon fell and Leo sat down on a mound of grass, but just then he heard a scream as Vivian from 10 ran past him without noticing him, being chased by a vampire. Vivian almost outran the vampire, but it jumped on her back, biting her repeatedly in the throat until she died. The vampire looked around for Leo, but he had climbed up a tree in order to avoid the same fate as Vivian. Leo was one of the only tributes awake as Horn of Plenty played and 6 portraits were shown, including that of Monica, after she had been killed by Admiral from 1 during the bloodbath. Leo shook with rage as Monica's portrait was shown, but as he saluted her, fatigue took over and he fell asleep. The next morning, Leo was the first tribute to wake up and decided that he would try to look for some water. As he had woken up extremely early, it was dark, but he heard a cannon sounding and watched a hovercraft retrieve the body of Boysen from 11, a few meters to his left. Leo ran toward the clearing where the boy had died and felt some liquid, but as he put it to his lips, he spat it out in gasps, realizing that it was Boysen's blood after he had been killed by a vampire. As Leo was about to leave, however, he felt a hand grab his shoulder, making him shout. A vampire grinned evilly at Leo and he screamed when he saw its sharp 2 front teeth. Leo tried to run, but the vampire pulled him back and he screamed, but he kicked the vampire in the groin. As it bent over, Leo immediately climbed up a tree, and it was good that he was speedy, because as soon as he had hidden himself within the leaves, the vampire recovered and was searching for him, but did not check the tree or even look at it, much to Leo's relief, and he stayed here for the next few hours. The sun slowly set, and the vampire finally left Leo, before going to another clearing and killing Puzzin from 10. As Puzzin's cannon sounded, Leo, who needed food and water, climbed down from his tree and slowly approached the clearing where the vampire was still prowling for some more blood. Leo crept behind the vampire and lunged his dagger into the back of its head. The vampire snarled but dropped to the ground as Leo noticed some water in Puzzin's coat pocket. Leo ran towards the boy and jumped up in the air, managing to grab his jacket. Leo pulled it down and shook it, grinning as 2 bottles fell out. Although Leo was quite thirsty, as he had gone about 38 hours without drinking any water, he made sure to only take 5 small sips of water, so that he could ration the small amount of water he had. Leo needed food, but he decided that he could wait until day 3 to search for food, stating that the water was long enough to last him 10 days if he rationed it correctly. Horn of Plenty played once again that night, and the portraits of 3 fallen tributes were shown, including Boysen and Puzzin, all of whom had been killed by the vampires. Waking up on the 3rd day of the games, Leo was shocked when he saw a vampire directly underneath his tree. Leo desperately tried to find a way to stay quiet, but he dropped one of his water bottles. He caught it, but the vampire heard him and looked up, with a panicked Leo jumping off of the tree and onto the vampire's shoulders, before stabbing it as many times as he could with his dagger until it fell to his knees, pitched forwards, and died 20 minutes later. This near-death experience scared Leo, and so he thought about ways to hide from vampires in a more comfortable position. He instantly thought about camouflaging himself into the ground, which could keep him hidden from both the couriers and the vampires. Leo quickly grabbed some plants, leaves, grass, and roots, and he lay in the grass in a comfortable position before covering himself with these. He easily disguised himself as a moon, and this impressed Maxwell, as he had not realized Leo was good at camouflage. Shortly after Leo camouflaged himself, he heard the couriers, led by Sargon and Destiny, rushing past him, but they did not notice him, with Destiny telling Sargon that they could kill Guitar Boy together once they found him. Leo shook with rage, but a vampire leapt out from behind a tree and chased the 6 couriers, killing 3 of them and leaving just Admiral, Sargon, and Destiny as the remaining 3 couriers. After they left, Leo stabbed the vampire to death with his dagger before beginning to rest. He rested for the rest of the day and was given paints by sponsors, who knew that he could use these paints to camouflage. On the morning of the 4th day, Leo got to work with the paints he had been gifted. He first used his left hand to camouflage his right hand, and this impressed viewers even more, as Leo had not done much training and his background as a musician did not explain his talents with art. However, Leo appeared to sense the capital's confusion and announced that owners of restaurants would allow him to play his guitar as long as he managed to paint some paintings to hang on the restaurant's walls. As Leo managed to camouflage his entire body, he drank some water, but then heard a scream, followed by 2 pairs of footsteps. Leo was trampled by Forrest from 7, who was running away from a vampire. Forrest stepped on Leo's knife, causing him to scream in pain as his heel began bleeding and he dropped to the ground. Yet just as the vampire prepared to bite Forrest, Leo jumped up from his hiding spot and jumped onto the vampire's back, telling it that it would not kill another tribute in front of him. Forrest, who was one of the tributes who had congratulated Leo's music, appeared to recognize Leo as he repeatedly stabbed the vampire in the mouth, head, and eyes. However, as Leo shoved his knife into the vampire's mouth, he was bitten in the hand by its fangs. He dropped the knife, but he bit deep into the vampire's neck before ripping out its throat. The vampire finally died, and Leo glanced at a shocked Forrest, who was scurrying backwards. Leo begged Forrest not to leave, stating that he needed an ally. Forrest pointed at the hole in the vampire's leg, but Leo told him that he had been trying his best and that he did not yet know how to snap necks. Forrest nodded and then burst into laughter, asking Leo if he really thought that he was scared of him. Leo then laughed as well, before helping Forrest to his feet and apologizing for the cut on his heel. But Forrest pulled a bandage from his pockets and placed it on his wound. The boys then set fire to keep themselves warm, and Leo was delighted when he saw that Forrest had stolen bread from the cornucopia. They spoke about their lives in the districts, with Forrest being a famous woodcarver back in 7. When Leo asked him to demonstrate, Forrest grabbed some bark from the tree, and after a few minutes he had used his axe to carve a small guitar. Leo thanked Forrest for doing this, and Forrest grinned before taking some strands from his jacket. The boys spent the rest of the day making a guitar, which Leo used to play a song which made Forrest smile. Forrest told Leo that he had always loved music but had never touched an instrument before, making Leo gasp. He taught Forrest the basics about playing the guitar and informed him that he was practicing for a new album he planned to release in order to earn some more extra money. The boys went to sleep next to each other after putting out the fire, so as not to alert the couriers and the vampires. On the morning of day 5, Forrest woke up and screamed when he saw a tarantula directly next to him. Leo impulsively woke up and reflexively stabbed the tarantula, thinking that it was a tribute. Forrest glanced at Leo in shock, before thanking him for killing the tarantula. Leo grinned at Forrest before propping himself up on one shoulder. They rationed some more bread and counted all of Forrest's matches. Leo then shared some water with Forrest, and they appeared to be amazing friends by now. But after they heard Mana from 9 being chased and killed by a vampire, Leo growled and told Forrest that there had to be a way to kill vampires. Forrest agreed that they could not set traps, and told Leo that as his father was a member of a tracker jacker removal crew, he had some experience in trap setting and could potentially help trap vampires and kill them. Leo gladly let Forrest teach him how to set the snares, and the boys were gifted with long ropes, which Leo cut into pieces with his axe. Once the traps were set, Forrest asked Leo if he could kill the first vampire they found. Leo agreed, and the boys camouflaged themselves. Within minutes, a vampire got itself caught in their trap and was quickly decapitated by Forrest, who swung his axe into the vampire's neck again and again until its head rolled off. Maxwell Christie joked that if the vampires had been tributes, Leo and Forrest would be an extremely formidable pair, but due to the fact that the vampires were simply mutts, they did not count as kills. The next day, the boys woke up and exchanged jokes, making each other sigh and laugh. After a while, they decided to split up in order to explore the arena and maybe steal some food. They agreed to return to their camp after a few hours, and they exchanged an awkward embrace, before they laughed and walked in their separate directions. Unbeknownst to Leo, he was making his way towards the career camp. Once he reached, he was almost spotted by Admiral, but he hid behind a tree. In order to distract the couriers, Leo threw a stone towards the vampire, who chased after the couriers as they turned and ran. Leo immediately ran towards the camp and stole a bottle of water and a bowl of soup, before turning in the opposite direction and running back towards his camp. He occasionally looked back to make sure that Admiral Sargon and Destiny were not following him, but did not hear footsteps quickly approaching his position. He reached a clearing, but as he looked around for Forrest, he tripped on a rope and landed at Sargon's feet. Leo glanced at Sargon, who laughed and asked Leo if he really thought that he had not been spotted. Leo glared at Sargon, and he told him that he was at least not as arrogant as the couriers. This made Sargon laugh even harder, and he pointed his dagger at Leo and told him that for the sake of his family and friends back in District 2, he would make this kill as iconic as he could. As Sargon held Leo down and was about to stab him in the tongue, a stone hit him in the back of the head. Sargon spun around to see Forrest shouting, "Over here!" at him. Sargon grinned before pushing Leo to the side. Leo shouted at Forrest to stop, but Forrest simply gave him a sad smile before beginning to run. Sargon launched his knife towards Forrest and it hit him in the back, causing him to spin around in pain, and he dropped to his knees. Before pitching forwards and groaning in pain as Leo shouted obscenities at Sargon. Just before he fell, however, Forrest had managed to throw his axe and it hit Sargon in the chest. He roared in pain and removed the axe, dropping it to the ground, but due to the pain in his chest, he fell onto the axe, causing it to impale his back, sticking out of his chest. Leo then screamed at Sargon before running towards him with his dagger and beginning to stab him, shouting that he had killed Forrest, but Maxwell describing Leo as working his way up from the toes all the way up to the head. By the time Leo was done stabbing Sargon, he had stabbed him a total of 98 times and his body was barely unrecognizable, with the hovercraft having to dive down a total of 5 times to retrieve all of the bloodied parts of his body. Leo then ran towards Forrest, who was beginning to shake. Leo gulped in sorrow before grabbing his guitar and beginning to sing a song to Forrest. Forrest was made slightly happier by the song, and it was noticed that he was still smiling as he died during the crescendo of the song. By day 7, only Leo, Admiral, and Destiny remained. GameMaker Bean announced that the ground would begin crumbling from the perimeter inwards, and the only way to survive was to make it back to the cornucopia. Leo thought that he still had time before needing to run, but the ground immediately began crumbling and Leo was forced to run back to the cornucopia. He made it after 10 minutes, narrowly avoiding being swept into oblivion, but he heard the cannon of Admiral after Destiny had pushed him off of the ground and he fell into nothingness. Destiny was only a few minutes away from the cornucopia now, and so Leo thought of how he could hide from her. He noticed a long bag on the table inside the cornucopia and he ran towards it, before jumping inside and zipping it halfway up from the inside. Destiny soon arrived in the cornucopia and was confused when she did not see Leo inside. However, unbeknownst to her, Leo was gripping his 2 daggers carefully as he heard her. Destiny then noticed the bag Leo was hiding in and she thought it contained an extra sword for her, but as soon as she opened the bag, Leo jumped out and headbutted her. Destiny staggered backwards and Leo stabbed both of his knives into her stomach. She dropped to her knees in pain and Leo marched behind her, before stabbing his knives into both sides of her neck, causing her to pitch forwards, and the final cannon sounded, leaving Leo Torres as the victor of the 141st Hunger Games. He was extremely sorrowful during his interview, upset that he could not save Forrest. He returned to District 14 shortly after, where he released his newest album of blues music, which he called the Forrest Album, after his fallen ally who had sacrificed himself in order for Leo to live. He was always thought of as a rebel, but this was confirmed following the 149th Hunger Games. The 142nd Hunger Games took place in the year 164. It has always been believed that one can use the materials provided in the arena to their advantage, and these beliefs were confirmed to be true due to the events of the 142nd Hunger Games. This year's victor was a 17-year-old from District 8 named Rayon Charlemagne. Rayon had always been well known around District 8 as he was the son of a very famous dressmaker and designer, Andrew Charlemagne. Rayon learned some of his father's trade at a very young age and was known for following his mother, a teacher, to the school where she taught, although at the time he was only a toddler. This marked him as a firm favorite within the district, and Rayon could not walk down the Hem, the upmarket area where he lived, without one of his friends waving to him or a neighbor calling him over to drink some lemonade. As expected, he was the best dressed youth during the reaping with a purple tunic and black tie, with red dashes from side to side that he had designed on his own. He was close to the back of his enclosure, due to him being slightly taller than 6 feet, making him one of the taller boys. One of Rayon's friends cracked several jokes, causing the other boys to laugh, but Rayon remained silent. Leo Torres played a song on stage with the new guitar the Capitol had generously donated to him, before announcing 16-year-old Leah Hastings as the female tribute for District 8. Rayon cringed as Leah refused to go to the stage and was ultimately knocked out by a peacekeeper and dragged. Rayon's best friend, Step, laughed about this, but just then Rayon was announced to be the male tribute and Step immediately shouted in horror. Rayon swore and marched to the stage while snorting, with Ariel McKinnon describing him as dreamy, due to his long crimson curls falling down to his shoulders and his sharp black eyes staring straight ahead. But Ariel was slightly upset that Rayon was not very muscular, but pleased that he was rather tall. Rayon was extremely upset at his misfortune, and he hardly said a word as he was forced off of the stage and entered the town hall, where he was greeted by his two brothers Gazer and Linen, as well as his parents, who arrived a bit later. Rayon did not say a word until his parents arrived, with their arrival seeming to have cheered him up. They briefly spoke about how Rayon could win these games, and Linen cheerfully suggested that Rayon strangle someone with a jacket, as he would likely be given one to wear in the arena, which made Rayon wince in surprise. As Rayon gave Linen a weird smile, Gazer suggested that Linen volunteer for the games when he turned 18, as he had plenty of ideas on how to kill tributes with needles and any type of clothing. As he got ready to leave, Rayon was tackled to the ground by 5 of his 7 cousins, who were clearly very upset that their cousin had been reaped for the games. Rayon's aunt and uncle, along with his 4 grandparents, then walked in, before telling Rayon that he had to try his best to make it back home. Before Rayon was made to go to the train by peacekeepers, he was warned by his aunt that Braden Van Ord, his mentor, was addicted to alcohol and not very fit for mentoring, but Rayon was focused on hugging all 17 members of his family that had visited him. He appeared nervous as he made his way into the back carriage of the train, but he was greeted by Leah, who shook his hand. He then walked towards the bookshelf and read a book about different terrains, while jotting notes about which terrains would be easiest to fight in and which terrains would be hardest to fight in. Rayon shared some of his notes with Leah, and they both agreed that they needed to learn how to swim during training, as it would be extremely important for them if they were put in a water-based arena. Rayon then sat down to eat, and he used the knives on his plate to practice his knife-throwing skills, with Leah quickly following suit. Once he was done, he asked an AVOX to bring him some lunch, and he devoured the sandwiches offered. Their mentors, Braden Van Ord and Valor Tanner, soon walked in, and Braden collapsed onto a chair. When Leah asked Valor why Braden was like this, Valor scoffed in amusement and said that Toxic Boy had become intoxicated. But Braden did not appear to notice this and instead pitched forwards onto the table. Rayon asked Braden for some advice in the arena, but Braden did not appear to hear him, which annoyed Rayon. Braden then scoffed and asked Rayon why he was so upset, which made Rayon shout that he was angry enough that he had been reaped, but that he was even angrier that his own mentor was making himself intoxicated instead of being a help. Braden slurred that he had won his games while being mentored by Bark Berjak, and so if he could win with Bark as a mentor, Rayon could win on his own. But Rayon shouted that Bark was a friend of his grandfather. Braden laughed, but Rayon threw the candlestick at Braden's shirt, making him shout in rage. The two of them refused to speak to each other for the rest of the week before the games, but luckily for Rayon, he managed to make an impression on the other tributes without the help of Braden. He spent much of the first day swimming in the swimming pool, with the careers watching him and Sextus from 2 laughing at his attempts to swim. However, Rayon managed to swim several laps, though Del from 3 accidentally dropped a circuit he had been building into the pool, electrocuting Rayon badly. Rayon chased Del through the training center and they engaged in a fight, but both of them were tasered by Maxwell. On the second day, Rayon spent most of the day throwing knives at targets, but he soon decided to try his luck at the Trident station. He was easily able to throw his trident at targets that were higher in the air, but not far away, as he was extremely tall but not very muscular. He crossed paths with Thalassa from 4, but they did not exchange any conversation while they set traps for fish in the aquatic tank, before killing them with their tridents. This year, it was kept strictly confidential what tributes did during their 15-minute talent demonstrations with the game makers, but it was revealed that Rayon had earned a score of 8 after a demonstration of trident wieldings, leaving little doubt of expertise mastered in no less than 2 days. Although Braden was fast asleep, Valor congratulated Rayon for his high score, which he shared with Sextus from 2, Del and Chroma both from 3, and Thalassa from 4. During the interviews, Rayon tried not to draw too much attention to himself, and he realized that while Ariel was asking the careers how they planned to win the games, they were actually telling her their strategies without realizing it. And so Rayon listened carefully as they went on and on about their strategies. When it was Rayon's interview, he marched to the stage in a flowing purple robe, with flowers placed in his wavy crimson hair. He spoke confidently with Ariel, before winking at the cameras and saying she could expect a lot from him during the games, which made Ariel laugh. The next day, the tributes were taken to their launch rooms that were directly underneath the arena. Rayon put on the purple jumpsuit and goggles that he was made to wear, telling Valor, who had decided to visit him after Brayden fell asleep on the way to the launch room, that the arena was definitely a water-based arena, and that his training had been worth it. Valor then wished him the best of luck, and Rayon smiled, before strutting into his tube, and he tensed himself in anticipation as he was lifted up into the arena. This year's games took place in an abandoned pirate ship in Beach, featuring alligators, a feast, and lasting for 11 days. As soon as Rayon was lifted into the arena, he noticed that he was on an extremely tall podium, and due to his tall height, he nearly fell over as he was so high. Rayon also noticed that his podium was covered by waves and that the Cornucopia was on a small island. West of the Cornucopia was a large abandoned pirate ship, and Rayon acknowledged this before eyeing the Cornucopia, seeing that the only available weapons were tridents and extremely large fish hooks. Rayon decided to swim towards the ship, rolling his shoulders back. When the gong sounded, Rayon jumped off his podium and scratched his foot on a rock underwater, causing him to yelp, but he continued to swim towards the ship. Once he reached it, he noticed he was tall enough to reach a ladder leading into the ship, and so he yanked it down, before beginning to climb it. Rayon climbed up onto the ship and looked back at the Cornucopia Island to see that the bloodbath was already beginning. Rayon then smacked himself in the head, remembering that he had not gone to the Cornucopia, and so he dove back into the water and swam towards the island just as the couriers took control of the Cornucopia. Rayon immediately ran towards the trident, but Sextus suddenly slashed at him with a fishhook. Rayon leapt backwards before snarling at Sextus and tackling him to the ground, where he banged his head on a rock. Rayon later stated in his victor's interview that it was at this moment that he realized he needed to kill the District 4 tributes, as they would easily win these games if they were not killed early. Rayon subsequently ran into the Cornucopia to grab a trident before he blocked one of Thalassa's attacks, surprising her. Rayon then lunged his trident towards her neck, but she ducked and threw her trident at him. But he jumped back and the trident buried itself into the back of a now unconscious Sextus. Sextus slumped forwards as Thalassa gasped, due to the shock of having killed one of her stronger allies, and Rayon took advantage of this, slamming his trident into her chest, and she fell into the water, not moving. As Rayon was about to leave, he was tackled to the ground by Ocean from Vor, who had seen him kill Thalassa. As Ocean spoke about how he was going to kill Rayon, Rayon knocked him out with a rock, but when he saw the rest of the couriers grouping up, he decided to hide in a nearby crate. He hid here for several hours as the 4 remaining couriers sang and danced, not realizing that Rayon was in extremely close proximity to them. But Ocean decided to explore the beach instead of the ship, and the other couriers followed him, meaning that Rayon could leave his hiding spot. Once he was sure that the couriers were gone, he swam towards the ship and climbed up, before deciding to hide under the deck. After some exploring with a flashlight he had gotten from the Cornucopia, Rayon decided to sleep in the lowest deck, which showed several crates, and when Rayon opened one of them, he found an extremely sharp sword, which he decided would be useful to keep. He spent the next 2 days here, until the night of day 3, when he was awoken by a crack. Rayon slowly left his hiding spot with his flashlight and saw that there was a light switch in one of the abandoned cabins. He slowly walked towards it and he switched on the lights, but then roared in pain and collapsed to the ground, having just been electrocuted. He began shaking from the intense pain and slowly crawled up toward the desk in the cabin just as Del and Chroma from Tree walked in, and Chroma asked Del who had been electrocuted, without realizing that Rayon was hiding beneath the desk. Rayon held his breath as Del walked towards the desk, and he grabbed a sheet of paper from the desk. Meanwhile, Del sat down without seeing Rayon and began drawing a map of the arena, before asking Chroma to see if this was correct. Chroma grinned at Del and told him that he was in fact right, before saying she needed to urinate and went into the bathroom of the cabin. Del then glanced at the lights and the broken wine he had used to electrocute Rayon, and he shook his head. When Chroma returned, he told her that the tribute had definitely been electrocuted, but as Chroma dismissed this, Rayon leapt out from behind the desk and threw his piece of paper at Del. Del flinched as Rayon sprinted towards him and kicked him in the face, knocking him to the ground, despite Rayon having been electrocuted badly and the burns being slightly visible on his legs. Rayon slammed his trident into Del's head, sounding his cannon instantly. Chroma attacked Rayon with a hook, but he blocked her attack with his trident before pushing her away as he grabbed a map Del had been creating before sprinting away. Rayon used the map to navigate the arena for the next day, but as he prepared to sleep on the night of day 4, he turned around and saw a pair of eyes staring back at him, making him jump, as Leah walked towards him and begged him to start an alliance with her. Rayon asked Leah why he should do this, but she told him that she needed some water. Rayon told Leah that he had not found any water either since the start of the games and that he could not help her. However, Leah told Rayon that the district partners should work together and that Rayon had both a sword and a trident. Rayon appeared to have thought of something before smiling at Leah and saying that she had just given him an idea. Rayon asked Leah if she had seen something that could help them leave the ship, and Leah told Rayon that she thought she knew a place where there could be supplies to help them, but that she wanted to meet Rayon before exploring it, as she felt he was a great district partner. Rayon appeared quite touched by this and asked Leah where this place was. Leah led Rayon to the top of the ship, and as the wind blew at his crimson curls, she grabbed Rayon's trident and slammed it through several crates before slicing them away with his sword, with her strong skills impressing Rayon. Leah then moved away the broken crates, revealing a large metal hatch, and she pulled at it, but it could not move it. Rayon helped Leah move the hatch and it opened, revealing a door, but Leah fell in and Rayon grabbed her, trying to stop her fall. He succeeded and they climbed down slowly through the hatch, and Rayon misjudged his footing and fell down, hitting his back. He yelped in pain for a second, but then got to his feet. He then glanced around the room that had once been the maintenance cabin of the ship. Rayon glanced around to see several swords on the wall. He grabbed one and tossed it into the air, grinning as he caught it and swiped it at the wall. Leah noticed a fishing rod on the wall and shouted to Rayon that they could get food. Rayon asked Leah how they would leave the ship, but she pointed to a small lifeboat, which they could drag out of the hatch. Rayon agreed, but as he began to lift the lifeboat and placed both of his swords and his trident into the boat, Horn of Plenty played, signaling the start of day 5. Rayon was briefly distracted, but he helped Leah drag the boat out of the hatch. As they were about to jump into the water, they saw a group of alligators making their way towards them. Rayon shouted in fear and threw his arms out in order to protect Leah, but she told him that she did not need protection. Rayon grinned at her but told her to step backwards, and she agreed. Leah and Rayon walked 10 minutes to the other side of the ship, and Rayon jumped in, casting his fishing pole into the water. After a few minutes, he yanked it up, revealing some fish. He and Leah split the fish and ate. They continued with this strategy for the next few days, eating fish and whatever seafood they could find. Rayon taught Leah how to use the trident while he practiced with his swords. They both improved their weaponry skills and also improved their relationship, even becoming intimate one night and exchanging stories about their lives back in District 8 as he did so, with Rayon learning that Leah's family lived in a tenement and only got to eat dinner 3 times a week. Leah was shocked when she heard about how many family members Rayon had, asking him how he could afford to feed all of them, and she could be seen blushing in envy when he told her that some young ladies would pay him to visit their houses, and that he was a district celebrity as well as the son of 2 rich parents. Another night passed and the pair ate their fish, but Rayon saw from Horn of Plenty that 14 tributes still remained, and that the game makers were trying to manipulate the tributes back into the one place that contained more action. The next day, which was day 9 of the games, game maker Breen announced that a feast would take place in the cornucopia in 15 minutes, and each tribute would have something they desperately needed. Leah and Rayon both had different ideas on what they should do, with Rayon saying that they did not need any supplies, but Leah shouted that only Rayon had enough supplies and that he had not shared any supplies with her. Rayon gasped at this and asked Leah if she was serious, as they had gotten food for them and had shared the fish with her. Leah then told Rayon that she had despised him since the reaping because he was richer than her and had no interest in denying it. But Rayon shouted that it was not his fault that Leah's family was scum. Leah then charged at Rayon and pushed him, but he slapped her and asked her to be serious, stating that although he no longer liked her, this did not mean he wanted her to die. Leah then punched Rayon, but this did not appear to affect him, and he slashed her arm with one of his 2 swords, making her scream in pain. Rayon snarled at Leah as she dropped to the ground and glared at him. Rayon left Leah riding on the ground, and he slashed his sword at the nearest wall, telling her that he would attend the feast and that she was free to join him if she wanted, but that he would not force her to. After a few minutes, Rayon reached the cornucopia, leaving Leah on the ground, tempting himself, but snarling when he saw that the only thing available was a loaf of stale bread. As Rayon turned around, he was suddenly tackled to the ground by Ocean, who attempted to slam his hook, which was around his left hand, into Rayon's throat. Rayon struggled to fight against Ocean, who was much stronger than him, as he was from District 4. Ocean then slammed a hook into Rayon's left shoulder, making him scream. As Ocean was about to slit Rayon's throat, he coughed blood and fell off forwards. Leah revealed herself and removed a hook from Ocean's head as his cannon sounded. Rayon pushed Ocean's body off of him and thanked Leah for saving his life. But he glanced at the stale loaf of bread, which tributes were already fighting over, as they had not seen any bread in a while. However, Rayon grabbed Leah and they swam away, before reaching the ship and making their way towards a cabin overlooking the main deck. As Horn of Plenty played that night, Rayon saw that only 6 tributes remained, including him. Rayon was quite uncomfortable as he slept that night, but on the morning of the 10th day, while Leah was keeping watch, Rayon heard a scream and he spun around to see Leah lying on the ground with a hook in her back that Terra from Two had just thrown after killing her allies during the feast. As Leah begged Rayon to help her, Terra retrieved a hook from her back and slammed it through her left ear, causing blood to flow from her mouth, and her cannon sounded just a few seconds later, stopping her convulsing. Rayon immediately grabbed a plank of wood from the ground and smashed it into Terra's head, causing blood to fall as she spun around and snarled. Rayon then punched her in the face and repeatedly beat her with the board until she was screaming. Rayon asked her if she was seriously asking for mercy after she had just killed his district brother in front of his eyes, but Terra spat at him. In fury, Rayon grabbed Terra and marched over to the window overlooking the deck, swiftly defenestrating her as she fell screaming to the deck, where she hit her head on a wooden plank, and a cannon sounded a few seconds later. Realizing that he only had 3 opponents left, it seemed like Rayon wanted to win more than anything. Of course, the sentiment was shared by the other 3 remaining tributes. Rayon hence painted planks of wood to resemble faces, and he practiced killing these tributes with his swords and tridents, as well as with the hooks he had stolen from Terra, which he placed on his hand like Ocean had done, believing that this would help him kill other tributes, as he would not be wasting time grabbing a weapon. Later that day, Trunk from 6 was stabbed by Chroma, and Faraday from 5 threw himself onto the deck in order to commit suicide, which meant that only Rayon and Chroma remained. On the morning of the 11th day, after Rayon had spent the night getting rested and preparing himself for the games, he felt himself being yanked. Unbeknownst to Rayon, Game Maker Mina triggered a large wave, which swept the boat out to sea. Realizing that the final was imminent, Rayon grabbed his swords and his trident, making sure that the hook was attached to his hand. But as he was about to leave, he noticed that the ship was sinking. Rayon sprinted away, and he rushed towards the control cabin of the ship in order to stop the ship from sinking. However, as he reached, he noticed that the ship was being sunk on purpose by Chroma. The ship became more and more horizontal as Chroma yanked the controls back, grinning as she did so. Rayon screamed Chroma's name as she jolted around, and she threw her hook at him. Although he ducked, it hit him in the heart and he collapsed to the ground. Rayon screamed at Chroma, telling her that she was going to get both of them killed. Chroma laughed and told him that this was what she wanted to do, and she continued yanking the controls, causing the ship to sink even more. Rayon crawled towards her and asked her why she was trying to kill herself, and Chroma replied that she had no will to live and did not mind dying. Rayon tried to think of a way to convince Chroma to change her mind, but he was distracted by the pain in his heart. His shirt was now filled with blood, but he managed to get to his feet and he shouted at Chroma that her family would get killed if she did anything stupid like this. Chroma laughed and told Rayon that her family was already dead and that she had nothing to lose, but Rayon took a deep breath and threw his hook directly at Chroma. It hit her in the back and she fell to the ground in pain, but Rayon got to his feet and marched towards Chroma, albeit while staggering. Rayon had winced as he picked Chroma up, and when she realized what Rayon was about to do, she begged for mercy, but Rayon told her that he thought she was okay with dying, and Chroma squealed as Rayon launched her out of the window of the cabin, resulting in a scream lasting for several seconds, before she hit her head on a wooden plank and slid into the water, meeting her end at the alligators, with her cannon sounding seconds later. Due to the hook still stuck in his heart, Rayon had to go to surgery in the capital, but he ultimately recovered from his wound. He was celebrated in District 8 for his way of victory. While recovering, he was visited by Valor, who congratulated him. But although Brayden went to visit him as well, it was only to buy the drinks offered at the hospital. During the victor's interview, Rayon flirted shamelessly with Ariel, and she told him that he was now known as the Defenestrator for his way of throwing 2 of his opponents out of a window. Rayon soon became an actor in the capital and played the role of President Cardew's husband, Josephus, in a film about Cordelia's life, which earned him a reasonable amount of fans in the capital and Pan Am. However, he still hated Brayden for being a horrible mentor. The 143rd Games took place in the year 165. This year's victor described the arena as dreamy, but also stated that she did not see the point of dreamy arenas, as in the end tributes would have to kill each other. This year's victor was a 16-year-old from District 2 named Lavinia Dolohov. The amount of career volunteers since the 140th Hunger Games had gradually increased, due to the career districts of 1, 2, 4, and occasionally 7 being ashamed that they had not produced a single career victor in 7 years. Although Evie Dalloway was from District 7, she had not trained in an academy and was therefore not recognized as a career tribute or victor. The Reaping Games were subsequently made more lethal than District 2, with full weapons. The volunteers could use to eliminate their other opponents. Rayon Charlemagne was delighted when he arrived in District 2, and Mayor Sabina Dalton, daughter of Icarus Dalton, sat him down as the 17 volunteers entered the Reaping Arena. Lavinia was not very popular around District 2, as she preferred to keep to herself. She was, however, a talented knife thrower and had passed the admission test at the Dalton Elite, which was run by Julianis Castro. It therefore came as no surprise that Lavinia was one of the 15 female members of the Dalton Elite who volunteered for the games. She put on a good show during the initial scuffle by removing her opponent's bracelets with her toes in a rather iconic fashion. When she encountered a final opponent, a short and muscular 18-year-old named Cecilia, Lavinia scoffed and tossed her auburn curls over her shoulder, but were engaging in a wrestling match with Cecilia. Although Cecilia managed to rip one of Lavinia's 2 remaining bracelets, Lavinia managed to kick her in the stomach before choking her into unconsciousness and ripping off of her remaining bracelet, although it was clear that she had no joy in doing this. Lavinia grinned when she was announced to be the female tribute, however, and she shouted in joy. As for the boys, a 17-year-old peacekeeper in training named Mayas Galvez sat on his opponents and grinned as they wriggled underneath him. One of his opponents, Bruto, managed to escape and engage in a fight with Mayas, although Mayas quickly defeated him and threw him to the ground. After this, Mayas kept a low cover and followed a large group of boys who had allied together, and after they had eliminated Cadmus, his strongest opponent, he attacked them and knocked them unconscious by bashing their heads together before ripping their bracelets off, leaving him as the male tribute for District 2. During the title ceremony, Mayas was clearly delighted and proud of his accomplishments, while Lavinia tried not to draw her attention to herself. But luckily for her, Mayas stole the show, according to Maxwell Christie and Ariel McKinnon. Lavinia was extremely happy during the farewell period, and she hugged her parents, before telling them that she would start her own family legacy, as the Dolohovs were currently not well known around the district. Before she left for the train, however, Lavinia was told by her father that she needed to make sure not to kill Mayas, as he was a peacekeeper in training and was friends with head peacekeeper Dalton. During the train ride, Mayas greeted Lavinia, but soon after, Julianis Castro arrived and took Mayas to a corner of the train carriage. Lavinia patiently waited for her mentor to arrive, watching as Julianis and Mayas appeared to be playing a game with their fingers called chopsticks. When Valerie Urquhart arrived, the first thing she did was tell Lavinia that she could not trust the District 1 tributes, but then pointed at Mayas, who was ripping a dummy from limb to limb. Before she told Lavinia that if she wanted to be a true career, she needed to be cunning and honorable, but it was not necessary to be a brute and put on a show. But Julianis heard this and scoffed in amusement, before telling Valerie that it was necessary for the careers to put on a show. A fight soon broke out between Valerie and Julianis, with Valerie telling Julianis that he had not put on a show in his games, and he subsequently could not lecture Mayas and Lavinia to put on a show. Julianis grinned and recounted how he had watched Valerie cut her final opponent into several parts back in the 127 games. But Valerie shouted that this opponent had killed her brother. Valerie then grabbed Lavinia's hand and stormed out of the carriage as Maya started lifting weights. Another argument broke out while they were eating, as Maya accidentally threw a weight onto Valerie's toes and she shouted at him and threw one of her knives at his arm. But he then glanced at Julianis and removed his shirt, revealing body armor. And Julianis told Lavinia that she should always check if her opponents have any body armor or not. Valerie then growled at Julianis, who sneered back at her and told her that he was simply training Maya for the games. Lavinia threw the contents of her glass at Julianis' face and he swore, telling her that his father, Lucius, would hear about this, and Lavinia laughed. Before training, Lavinia and Mayas met Citrine and Primadonna, both from 1, and they spent most of their time observing the other tributes. During training, they also met Drake and Pearl, both from 4, and Sequoias and Karia, both from 7. On the first day of training, the group mainly introduced themselves to each other and discussed most of the other tributes, but it was noticed that when the tributes from 1 and 2 were not looking, the tributes from 7 were signing something to each other. Lavinia was the only one to notice this, and she realized that Sequoias and Karia were trying to leave the group. Drake and Pearl also noticed this, and Lavinia wiggled her pinky finger towards Sequoias. During her initial training session with the game makers, Lavinia showed off as many skills as she could during the 15 minutes given. She started by throwing knives and tossing spears, before grabbing a bow and arrow and making a letter L using several arrows and knives, which she threw using her mouth. Because of this, she earned a score of 11, putting her at the top of this year's lineup, while the rest of the career scored 8, 9, and 10. And Myers was known to be extremely furious when the scores were announced, and it took 20 minutes for Julianus to calm him down. During the interview, Lavinia tried to put on a show like Citrine and Prima Donna, and she spoke about the way she would kill other tributes. Most of it were quite iconic. And Myers was known to ask Lavinia directly after her interview if he could use some of these ideas, but Lavinia walked straight past him. During her interview, Lavinia also emphasized how much she would like to start her own legacy as a winner, but Julianus scoffed in amusement from behind the stage, making Myers laugh. But Valerie tasered both of them, and they did not say a word to anyone for the rest of the night. The next morning, Lavinia had to be dragged out of bed by Valerie, and she was taken to the holding room underneath the arena. Lavinia glumly put on her golden jacket and glared at her tube, but Valerie told her that she could wish for the best, as she was a career tribute and easily won the volunteer games. Valerie then reminded Lavinia that she could not get arrogant, and that she should not let Myers influence her, and that she would make her family proud. The two of them exchanged an embrace before Lavinia entered her tube and it rose up into the arena. This year's games took place in Lavender Fields, featuring annoying bees, an oxygen mask race, and lasting for 12 days. Lavinia gasped in delight as she saw the purple field stretching out for miles when her podium was lifted into the arena. Lavinia then looked around for her allies and nodded when she saw Citra and a few podiums to her left. She put one arm in front of her head and leaned the other arm back, in order to tell Citrine that she would try to kill her opponents with a bow and arrow. Citrine mimed killing someone with an axe, but he saw Sequoias on the podium to Lavinia's right, and he pointed towards Sequoias. Lavinia signed to Citrine that she would keep the District 7 tributes alive for a few days, and Citrine nodded. When the gong sounded, Lavinia sprinted into the cornucopia and grabbed a bow and arrow, but accidentally shot Citrine in the arm. He fell to the ground and Lavinia sprinted towards him before helping him to his feet. Lavinia then fired an arrow into the head of Tidal from 5, and as he fell to the ground, she fired one at Sequoias, causing him to drop to the ground, and the arrow hit his heart, killing him instantly. Drake then took control of the cornucopia, while Myers defended him with a machete. The group then regrouped after the remaining tributes had fled the cornucopia, and Prima Donna and Myers explored the cornucopia clearing, seeing 10 bodies and announcing the group of this. The group rejoiced, but just then Garden from 9 became conscious and suddenly ran away, despite being stabbed by Myers. Lavinia then pointed at Sequoias' body, saying Garden must have killed him, which the others seemed to accept. However, it was noticed by Maxwell and Ariel that Myers was looking at Lavinia in a slightly suspicious manner, and upon a rewatch, it was noticed that while Myers had been defending the cornucopia with his machete, he had seen the arrow hit Sequoias, and also knew that there had only been one bow and arrow in the cornucopia and that Lavinia was currently holding it. Lavinia noticed Myers staring at her, but she shrugged at him and raised an eyebrow, asking him if everything was okay. Myers scoffed at her and told her everything was fine, but as he crossed past her, he whispered arrows into her ear, and Lavinia flinched, but Myers smirked and put a finger to his lips. Lavinia nodded at Myers and she slapped a bee that was approaching her, before telling the others that these bees could be threats. However, Drake dismissed Lavinia's concerns. As Drake specialized in studying mutations at the training academy in 4, the others agreed with him. That night, Lavinia kept first watch and appeared to be mumbling to herself about the games, with Ariel swearing that she heard Lavinia talking about the arena, the bees, and the Hunger Games in general. On the morning of the second day, the careers decided to try to hunt for some of their threatening opponents. Although they did not find much during their first few hours of hunting, they managed to settle down and find a clearing to rest in. But after a few minutes, Pearl began complaining about the heat. The others listened to the 17-year-old's moans and groans and complaints until Myers finally became fed up and crept up behind her before slamming his machete into the back of her head, her cannon sounding instantly. The others did not care that Myers had just killed Pearl, but were more annoyed that they had to move to another clearing for a few minutes for the hovercraft to retrieve Pearl's body. Lavinia asked Myers why he had done this, but he smirked at her and told her that he had gotten tired of Pearl complaining. Lavinia stared at Myers, but he grabbed his sword before asking Lavinia if she was complaining. But Lavinia quickly assured Myers that she did not have a problem with him killing Pearl. The group therefore traveled through the fields and looked ahead for other tributes. Night fell, and as Lavinia tried to set camp for the night, the couriers noticed a spark of light. Myers smirked, asking Citrine how someone could be as stupid enough to start a fire in the arena when the couriers were beginning to hunt. Lavinia told Myers that they just needed to get warm, and Myers stared at her, before turning around, muttering that something about what a softie Lavinia was, and she scowled. But Myers noticed that a figure had seen him when he launched a sword through the air, and it hit Anton from 14 in the abdomen, and he yelped before collapsing to the ground. The couriers ran towards Anton, who was trying to crawl away, and Citrine quickly finished him off by snapping his neck. The next day, the group continued hunting down tributes and managed to kill 3 of them, but unfortunately for Lavinia, she did not get to kill any of the 3, but it appeared that she had no interest in doing so. When Myers asked her why she was not having fun, she replied that she could be a courier without drawing out the kill. Myers shrugged and walked away, but could be seen mocking Lavinia. However, Lavinia did not notice this. On the morning of the 4th day, the couriers were awoken by the game makers, who announced that poisonous gas would be leaked into the arena 5 minutes after this announcement ended, and the only way one could survive was to grab an oxygen mask from the cornucopia. Lavinia was the first to react, and she sprinted the cornucopia as the dome timer on the roof of the arena started counting down from 5 minutes. The 6 couriers immediately sprinted back, and as Lavinia made her way to get a mask, she was hit in the arm with a knife that Garden had thrown. Lavinia yelped in pain and staggered back to her allies, and Myers removed the knife from her arm, before adding it to his collection with little concern for Lavinia. Garden then grabbed his mask and fled, whilst Lavinia, Myers, and Primadonna decided to keep watch, while Citrine, Drake, and Korea ran in to grab their masks. Just as Citrine was about to grab his mask, he was stabbed in the back of the head by Oil from 6. Oil then grabbed Citrine's mask, but as he turned to run, he was nearly impaled by Drake's spear. Oil therefore started dueling Drake, while Lavinia noticed Karia sneaking up on Drake with his sight. Lavinia shouted a warning to Drake and he spun around, before snapping Karia's neck. Myers grinned and threw a knife at Drake, and he fell to the ground in pain and shouted at Myers, but managed to block Oil's attack as the timer passed 2 minutes. Oil soon overpowered Drake and smashed his head into the ground, asking Myers to help him, but Myers appeared amused as Drake screamed for help. Drake managed to spear Oil in the chest, but Oil managed to muster enough strength to bludgeon Drake to death. As Drake's cannon sounded, Oil asked Myers if he could join his alliance, but Myers threw a knife at Oil's head. By this time, all the commotion had ended. The timer had passed 40 seconds, and therefore Myers and Lavinia ran inside to grab their masks. As they neared the podium, Myers was punched in the face by Primadonna, who had seen the District 2 tributes betraying their allies. Primadonna and Myers dueled for a few seconds before they agreed that it would make sense for them to continue their alliance. They therefore grabbed their masks, but as Lavinia turned to run, Myers threw knives into each of the 5 remaining masks except for one, before he turned and grinned at Lavinia, telling her that this was how one took advantage of other tributes. Myers was congratulated by Primadonna for this, and he kissed her on the cheek in a joking manner. Just as Myers was about to slash the remaining mask, Lavinia told him that they should leave one fixed mask, as the other tributes would kill each other fighting over this mask. Myers agreed and marched away from the cornucopia and out of the clearing, beckoning Lavinia and Primadonna to follow him. Primadonna ran towards Myers, but Lavinia frowned, and it was clear that she was having second thoughts about her strategy. The timer soon passed 20 seconds, and Lavinia glanced at Myers, but then gasped slightly when she saw Tyra from 6 running towards the cornucopia. Myers smirked as Tyra grabbed a damaged mask, but she soon saw that this was damaged and grabbed a non-damaged mask. Myers prepared a knife to throw at Tyra, but Lavinia purposefully bumped into him and he dropped the knife, swearing loudly and alerting Tyra, and she sprinted him away, whilst Myers threw a knife at her which flew above her head. Obviously, Myers was annoyed with Lavinia and warned her not to distract him again, but he agreed not to kill her. Myers let Prima Donna decided what the group should do, and they decided to make a list of their strongest opponents, with Lavinia believing that they should have done this during training. As they prepared to sleep that night, Lavinia noticed that Tyra was just a few meters away from this group and was spying on them. Tyra immediately hid her head, but Lavinia waited until Mayus and Prima Donna were asleep before she walked towards Tyra and greeted her. Tyra leapt around and was scared to see Lavinia there, but as she scurried backwards, Lavinia told her that she did not want to hurt her. Tyra did not seem to believe this, but Lavinia smiled and told her that if she wanted to kill her, she would have done it by now. Over the next few days, Lavinia waited until it was night to visit Tyra, and viewers found the relationship between the tall career girl and the tiny 13-year-old rather touching. Tyra mainly spent most of these days asking Lavinia why she was not killing her, but Lavinia openly admitted that she did not know how much of a brute these games could make a tribute, even a career. Lavinia therefore gave food to Tyra, and they spent some nights speaking about their lives back in the district, with Tyra being surprised that Lavinia had trained for the Hunger Games since the age of 4, and Lavinia gladly listened to Tyra talking about how she was the only clean citizen from her district, meaning that she was not addicted to morphling like the others back in 6. However, Lavinia always made it back to her allies in time as the sun rose, making sure to only visit Tyra during her night watch. Some others back in Districts 1, 2, and 4 believed that Lavinia was too soft for her career tribute, whilst Maxwell began a long monologue about how he'd been shunned by his family for being the only one in 2 not to attend the training academy, as he was more interested in cooking. Mayus was sometimes suspicious when he tossed and turned and saw that Lavinia was in another clearing, but he did not think much of it. On day 8, the game makers announced that a feast would be held in the cornucopia and that the tributes would get something they desired. Unfortunately for Tyra, she ran towards the cornucopia as soon as the announcement ended and briefly forgot that she was in the clearing next to the one the careers were in. Mayus threw a knife at her abdomen and she fell to the ground, and a bee flew into her mouth. As Tyra tried to spit it out, Lavinia gasped as Mayus placed a hand over her mouth. Prima Donna asked Mayus if he was going to stab her or snap her neck, but Mayus did not pay attention and instead smothered Tyra with his bare hands. After Tyra's cannon sounded, it was noticed that Lavinia was slightly upset that Tyra had died. The careers then sprinted back to the cornucopia and they hid in the fields as they waited for the feast platform to rise in the mouth of the cornucopia. Mayus decided to keep watch while Lavinia and Prima Donna grabbed the feast bags for Districts 1 and 2. As Lavinia sprinted towards the bag for District 2, Garden leapt out from behind the cornucopia and slashed his sight at Lavinia, but she punched him in the face and he reeled backwards. Mayus threw a knife at Garden, but he held up his sight in defense, before using the sight to cover himself as he ran back into the cornucopia to grab the feast bag for 9. Lavinia grabbed 2's bag and grabbed Prima Donna, who had been hit in the stomach by Garden's sight and was struggling to walk. Lavinia screamed at her to forget 1's feast bag, and she grabbed Prima Donna before running away with her and Mayus to a nearby clearing. When they were safe, Lavinia examined Prima Donna's wound and saw that she was bleeding quite a bit, but Lavinia bandaged Prima Donna's wound. She was stung several times by the bees and she finally got annoyed and tried to shoot a bee with her arrow, but it flew into the grass as the bees are incredibly small and hard to kill. Mayus suggested that he trap the bees before killing all of them at once. And it was noticed that Lavinia seemed to despise Mayus slightly after he'd killed Tyra, but Mayus did not notice this. Lavinia opened her feast bag and was surprised to only see 1 set of body armor, but as she was about to put it on, Mayus grabbed it and attached it to his chest, which annoyed Lavinia even further, and she used her shoes to kill some bees. Mayus helped Lavinia kill some of the bees and Prima Donna helped a little, but they all agreed that it would be more effective to trap the bees. Lavinia remembered a former victor, James Logan, who had used a box to trap some bees in his games. Therefore, Lavinia and Mayus asked to be gifted with some wire. Once they had been gifted with the wire, Mayus used some string from his shoe, jacket, and shirt to make a box. They then lured the bees into the box before trapping them. They were pleased with this and decided to sleep, with Lavinia deciding to take the first watch as she slept with her head on the box. When Tyra's portrait was shown in the sky that night, she cried slightly, which made her mentor, Valerie, shake her head in disgust, while Juliana grinned at Valerie and said that a career needed to be iconic in order to be remembered. Lavinia cried a little more, but stopped when Mayus turned around in his sleep and continued to snore. The 3 of them then tried to think about how they could kill their strongest opponents, with Mayus asking if he could kill Garden. Lavinia nodded in and said he could, as long as Prima Donna killed Huck from 11 and she managed to kill Dust from 12. The 3 agreed to this plan and were clearly relieved that only 6 tributes remained. On the night of the 10th day, Prima Donna took first watch for a change and Lavinia slept with her head on the box of bees. As the sun dawned on the 11th day, the pair from two were awoken by Prima Donna throwing her knife towards Lavinia's head, although it narrowly missed and flew past her. Myas had faster reflexes and as Lavinia was trying to comprehend what was happening, Myas was already on his feet with a sword and he slashed Prima Donna in the arm. However, she managed to run towards Myas, but as she was about to throw another knife at him, Lavinia threw the box of bees at Prima Donna, causing her to scream in pain and fall to the ground as she began twitching. After a few minutes, her painful groans stopped and her cannon sounded. Lavinia and Myas agreed to stay together until they killed the other three tributes. On the night of day 11, they noticed movement to a clearing a few meters away and ran towards this clearing, where they found Huck twitching on the ground after several bees had stung him. But as a bee flew into a convulsing dust mouth, Myas covered his mouth with his hand, causing the bee to bite the interior of his dust mouth until it flew down his throat and dust cannon sounded. Fearing what Myas would do to Huck, Lavinia quickly snapped his neck before wincing as Myas trod on Dust's back. Then next morning, Gamemaker Breen announced that the three remaining tributes needed to make it back to the cornucopia as quickly as they could, or else their cannons would detonate in 5 minutes. Lavinia and Myas quickly sprinted back and reached within 4 minutes, and yet as Lavinia began panting, Garden threw one of his 6 sides at her. She quickly ducked and fired one of her 3 arrows at Garden, although he managed to dodge this one. Myas quickly chased after Garden, yet as they emerged once again around the cornucopia, Lavinia shot another arrow, but missed. Lavinia realized she only had 1 arrow, and she glanced at Myas and Garden, both of whom were fighting, and she contemplated whom she should kill. However, she suddenly became furious that Myas had killed Tyra back on day 8, and so she shot him in the abdomen, despite him screaming at her to help him. Myas dropped to the ground and snarled at Lavinia, telling her that she was unworthy of the title of Career Tribute as she was an extremely soft tribute, a sentiment that was shared by many in Snow Square. Garden then smashed his sight into Myas' head, sounding his cannon as Garden turned to face Lavinia. He roared and charged at her, and she held up her bow in defense, but Garden pushed it out of the way and tried to push the sight into Lavinia's throat. However, Lavinia pushed Garden away and grabbed his sight before slamming it into his chest, which sounded his cannon after a few seconds and left Lavinia as the winner of the 143rd Hunger Games. After her victory, Lavinia was upset that she had not been very well received by career districts, with many believing that she should not have betrayed Myas, who was a capital favorite, whilst others believed that she was too soft to have the title of career, based on her relationship with Tyra. However, Lavinia continued to believe that one did not need to be as brutal as Myas to be a career tribute, although this sentiment was not echoed by others. Lavinia therefore did not mentor future tributes because of her depression, and just a week after her victory, her parents were found killed in her house in Victor's village, a mystery that has not been solved. Lavinia herself disappeared the next year after an argument with Julianus Castro, and as no suspects have been found in her disappearance, her fate is a mystery. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on August 15th with the 144th to 146th Hunger Games. What do you think about Lavinia's disappearance? If you go back through the video, you might find several motives for those who would want to kill her. Good luck.